Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ diwan-e-ghalib-meri-zubaani. To all our returning viewers, we are delighted you could join us again. And for the new viewers, we are happy you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now today's episode is part of the DGMZ Miniseries that we are currently running, dedicated to the immortal love story of Layla-e-Majnun. As part of this series, we are reading the story of Layla-e-Majnun through a book. In addition, we are also exploring this story via paintings and Urdu poetry, Sher or Shairi. For your awareness, there's a whole dedicated playlist that is created for this mini-series. You can access it from the homepage of the channel and listen to all the episodes in sequence, both of the narration and of the paintings and Sher or Shairi. So today we are going to pick up from chapter 48 onwards. But before we get into the narration for today, DGMZ would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate Suluk Press, publishing house, for allowing us to narrate this story from their publication titled The Story of Layla-e-Majnun Nizami. Translated from the Persian and edited by Rudolph Gelpke. English version in collaboration with E. Matin and G. Hill. Final chapter translated from the Persian by Pirzia Inayat Khan and Omid Safi. Now the description section of this episode will have a link to this book for viewers who want to own a copy. In addition, we will also post the links of DGMZ Ghazal episodes where Ghalib mentions Layla Majnun in different contexts. That, in fact, is the inspiration behind doing this entire mini-series dedicated to this immortal love story. So, let's get into the narration for today. Start of narration. The story of Layla-e-Majnun. Chapter 48. When Majnun heard the stranger's words, the new moon of a smile wandered over his face, and he replied, "Oh, my noble sir, the path you have taken is full of danger, and it would be better for you to retrace your steps. Your place is not with me, for you have tasted not one of my countless sufferings. Look, I have nothing left but these few beasts, no foothold of my own. How could I provide one for you? How could I live in harmony with you when I cannot live with myself? Even demons flee from me and my talk. What then can you hope to gain? You search for the warmth of a human being, but I am a lonely savage. Return to your own kind. Let my story be a warning to you. You and I, we do not agree. Your ways differ from mine. You are your best friend. I destroy myself. Leave me. As a reward for your long journey, accept my advice. You have found here one who has become a stranger to himself, one who feeds on pain. Say to him, Allah be with you, and leave him as you found him. Go. If you do not leave on your own account, you will in the end have to flee, hurt, soul and body, whether you want to or not. Thus spoke Majnun. Salam of Baghdad heard his words, but they did not still his desire. I implore you, for God's sake, he insisted, do not refuse my thirst, a drink from your well. I have come to you as a pilgrim. Do not prevent me from praying in your Mecca. In the end, pressed hard by the youth, Majnun, to his regret, had no choice but to give in to his demand. Salam was happy. Fetching his bundle, he opened it, spread a rug on the ground, and heaped delicacies upon it: halwa, sweetmeats, and other sugared and spiced food. Then he said, be my guest as I am yours. Break bread with me. Do not refuse my repast. You may want to fast, but man, according to his nature, must eat to retain his strength. Fall to. But Majnun did not accept his invitation. I am one of those, he replied, who have eaten the eater within themselves. Bread and halwa feed the strength of those who look anxiously after their own well-being. I am free from this anxiety. How then can fasting harm me? The youth from Baghdad took these words in his own way. Thinking that he should encourage and comfort the comfortless, he replied, it would be better if you did not always feed the despair in your heart. Even the sky does not remain the same. It changes face and constantly reveals to us new pages in the book of fate. One moment, brief as the blinking of an eye, may open 100 doors, leading from grief to joy. Do not be so faithful to your sorrow. Better to turn away from it. Better to laugh than to weep, even if the wound still smarts. My heart also was broken, my body exhausted and paralyzed. Yet Allah, in His mercy, showed me the way out of this misery. In the end, your grief too will be softened, and you will forget what happened. Is not the flame of love which set you alight the fire of youth? When the youth becomes a man, even this burning furnace cools down. The advice was well meant. Majnun suppressed his anger and answered, who do you think I am? A drunkard? A lovesick fool? A slave of my senses? Made senseless by desire? Understand, I have risen above all that. I am the king of love in majesty. My soul is purified from the darkness of lust, my longing purged of low desire, my mind freed from shame. I have broken up the teeming bazaar of the senses in my body. Love is the essence of my being. Love is fire, and I am wood, burned by the flame. Love has moved in and adorned the house. Myself has tied its bundle and left. You imagine that you see me, but I no longer exist. What remains is the beloved. And you believe this love, so heavy with grief, could ever run dry? Never, unless the stars pale in the sky. You think this love could be torn from my heart? I tell you, sooner you could count the grains of sand in the desert. Therefore, if you want to talk to me, keep your tongue in check. Rather, take care of yourself and spare me such nonsense. Thus Majnu advised the youth, who had to admit his error. Beware of thoughtless speech. Before you shoot your arrow, test the bow. Is not the string too slack for the target? Your arm too weak? Words can be shot even faster than arrows, but shame and regret remain. Only for a short time did Majnu and the youth from Baghdad walk the same path. Had not the hermit warned his visitor? For a while, Salam bravely accepted life in the desert, and not without reward, for Majnu's verses were wonderful gifts, pearls of great beauty, which he, the wanderer through the world, scattered on the ground. Salam collected them all and preserved them carefully in the casket of his memory. But soon, the youth from Baghdad could no longer endure life in the wilderness without food or sleep. He felt that he would perish if he stayed much longer. And so he left the beasts and their master, returning to the land of men and to Baghdad. There he made people listen to the poems he had gathered, and all were amazed and moved to the depths of their being. The story of Layla and Majnun, chapter 49. Whatever befalls us has its meaning, though it is often hard to grasp. In the book of life, every page has two sides. On the upper one, we inscribe our plans, dreams, and hopes. The reverse is filled by Providence, whose verdicts rarely match our desire. Who can decipher fate's handwriting? However, what at first we are unable to read, we then have to endure later on. Our thoughts and wishes go out into the future, but often we make mistakes and have to pay when our reckonings do not balance. Thus we admire a rose and long to possess it, but a thorn wounds our outstretched hand. It bleeds when we withdraw it. We suffer from hunger and thirst and unfulfilled desire, and forget that satisfaction might be our peril and indigence our salvation. Often, fate and man's desire are in conflict. It is better, therefore, to accept than to rebel. Do not forget that what appears to be vinegar sometimes proves to be honey. Layla, the enchantress, was a treasure to others, but a burden to herself. If to her husband she appeared to be a precious jewel, he was for her a serpent coiled around her. In his eyes, she was the moon. She saw him as a dragon holding her in his jaws. So each suffered from the other. For Layla, this existence was constant torment. Was she not like a ruby enclosed in the heart of a stone? She had no weapons but patience and deceit. She knew no other grief or happiness but her secret love, which she hid from all eyes, especially from those of her husband Ibn Salam. Was he in a better state? Was his fate easier than Majnun's? In the eyes of the world, he possessed Layla, who was more precious to him than anything else. Yet, this possession was an illusion. He knew this, and he too had to keep it secret. He guarded a treasure to which no path would lead him. Although it belonged to him, he was not allowed to enjoy what was his. Such a wound smarts, but his love was so strong that he felt grateful even for pain. He was a magician, keeping a fairy captive in the world of men to worship her forever. Did Layla know that? She hid her tears from her husband. When he came, she smiled. She was like a candle which burns alone, spreading its cheerful light, yet shedding waxen tears at the same time. But the turning wheel of heaven reveals what fate has decided, without pity for mortal man. Where in the end is he to go who loves without being loved? In time, Ibn Salam lost all hope. Layla saw him rarely and estranged from her who, though his wife, was still a bride, he fell ill. The grief hidden in his soul poisoned his body. A violent fever seized him, and his breath was as hot as the wind from the desert. A doctor was called, a skillful man who well knew his art. He felt the patient's pulse, examined his water, and gave him healing potions, which gradually quenched the fire. Thus, he showed the ailing body a way to health, and it seemed that Ibn Salam was saved. But as soon as he was slightly better, he ate and drank, and did what the doctor had forbidden him. The fever, which had sheathed its claws, attacked anew. The evil which had left him returned. What was to be done? This time the doctor was helpless. Thus, the first wave of the flood softens the clay. The second carries it away. A wall, cracked and shaken to its foundations, may survive one tremor. If a second wave follows, it must collapse. Ibn Salam was still young, though weakened by illness and grief. For 2 or 3 days, his strong nature resisted the new attack. But then his breathing became slower and heavier until the soul fled his body and left this world of misery, dancing away from the earth with the wind. What we are and possess is but a loan, and that not for long. Do not clutch what has been given to you, for joy and desire to possess are but nails fastening you to the perishable world. To obtain your jewel, you have to burst open the casket and take wing like the dove from the tower on which you are standing. Ibn Salam then was dead. And Layla, what did she do? Although she had never loved him, he had, after all, been her husband, and she pitied him. On the other hand, she felt relief. For how long had she veiled her heart, like her face? Now she felt like one of the animals, gazelles or wild asses, which her beloved had freed from the hunter's snares. The shackles she had worn for years suddenly fell off. How she enjoyed this freedom to weep to her heart's content, without shame or fear of watchful eyes. No one could be certain whom she was mourning. No one could know that she was shedding tears, not for the dead Ibn Salam, but for the living Majnun. Only the outer shell of Layla's mourning was her husband's. The kernel was her beloved. Now Layla too was free as Majnun, but her freedom was different. It is the custom among the Arabs that after her husband's death, a widow must veil her face, seeing no one, for 2 years. She must live in her tent, withdrawn from the world, mourning and lamenting the dead. Nothing could be more welcome to Layla. Now she was free, without fear, to give heart and soul to her beloved. End of narration. So 2 great chapters indeed. Let's do a brief impression before we go ahead and close the episode. So chapter 48. It's very interesting how this youth who is so impressed by Majnun takes this tedious journey, finds Majnun, somehow convinces Majnun against Majnun's best decision to stay with Majnun, be with Majnun. Majnun warns him, Majnun tries to discourage him, but nothing works. And the guy or the lad, as the book says, stays with Majnun and tries to live the hard life of complete detachment from any and everything that Majnun had been living for so long. The youth tries to live that life, and in return, of course, he gets to hear Majnun's beautiful poetry, which he collates and collects in his memory. But after some time, this harsh, hard life, devoid of anything and everything, becomes too much for the lad. And he has to admit that this life he will not be able to bear or handle. This life would kill him. Unlike Majnun, who has survived this lifestyle for a long time. So he leaves Majnun. But what I found very interesting in this chapter is towards the end, Nizami says, he felt that he would perish if he stayed much longer, and so he left the beasts and their master, returning to the land of men and to Baghdad. There he made people listen to the poems he had gathered, and all were amazed and moved to the depths of their being. So it seems like, because the fact remains that Majnun's poems were never collated formally, on paper, or there was no compilation because there was nobody around when Majnu was compiling his poetry. He used to recite his poetry to the wind in the desert, to the sand dunes, right? But this is one connect. This is that one thread which we get to discover, wherein somebody comes and stays with Majnu, no matter how brief that period was, but still stays with Majnu, listens to his poetry, takes back his poetry, and then recites it, shares it with other people. So seems like whatever poetry we are aware belonging to Majnu, probably Salam from Baghdad would have contributed heavily to it. So that was something very interesting in chapter 48. Now moving to chapter 49. In the beginning, the way Nizami sets the stage is beautiful. I mean, so many idioms and phrases and parallels which he draws are just amazing, right? Book of Life. Page has two sides. On one side we write, on the other side Providence writes. Who can ever decipher the fate's handwriting, right? And then he says, often fate and man's desire are in conflict. And then, love this line where he says, what appears to be vinegar sometimes proves to be honey. And just setting up the stage for the twist, right? By now, Layla, Majnun, us as readers have pretty much gotten accustomed to the fact, or resigned to the fact, that these lovers will never be able to meet on this earth. She's married, and she will stay married, and he will never be able to, in the earthly way, ever be able to make her his own. And suddenly this twist in the story. But even for the twist, Nizami shares with the reader that this twist was also long coming. Death of Ibn Salam was not an accident. It was not a sudden event. Death of Ibn Salam also was a culmination of the constant grief and sorrow he had been carrying ever since he brought Layla to his house as his bride. So the weight of that grief and sorrow, the weight of the loss he felt, wherein he could not make Layla his own, finally killed him, finally got the best of him. So yes, the twist comes in the story that Ibn Salam succumbs to his grief and his misery and dies. And suddenly there is a situation where Layla is free in the earthly free in the earthly way, right? In earthly terms, she's free. She's a widow now, her husband is no more. But towards the end of the chapter, of course, Nizami shares with us this Arab custom, which will keep her in isolation for 2 years, where she will have to stay inside a veil and lament and mourn the dead husband. For 2 years, she will have to be in this almost an exile that is forced on her following the death of her husband. She cannot see anyone. No one can see her, and that's why she will be in a veil, and she must live in her tent, withdrawn from the world, only mourning and lamenting. And Nizami says that nothing could be more welcome to Layla, because Layla's problem had always been that she could never even indulge in her grief and misery. Forget about chasing her happiness. That was totally out of question. But even her grief and misery she could not indulge in. She had to hide her sadness, her grief, her tears from everyone. And suddenly her husband's death, Ibn Salam's death, gives her a reason, gives her an outlet to at least start grieving and mourning freely and crying freely. And of course, in her heart, she knows that now she's free. Now she is free. So that's where Nizami ends the chapter. We will pick it up in the next episode and see how the story evolves. But for now, a huge twist in the story. Fate suddenly just changes the entire landscape for Layla Majnun because of this death of Layla's husband, Ibn Salam. Well, I hope you enjoyed the narration and the brief impression we did. Let us know via comments and feedback what your thoughts were on this episode. And like I said, feel free to access this story in totality via the dedicated playlist. We are pretty much towards the end of it. So now the playlist is almost complete, and you can just start from the first episode and just keep going chapter by chapter. That's all available to you now. I will go ahead and close this episode now. I'm sending a lot of love and light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.